"Mom, don't come today. Thanksgiving is for family who still know how to behave." My daughter said those words at 9:17 on Thanksgiving morning, while I was standing in my kitchen with oven mitts on both hands and a pecan pie cooling beside the window. For a moment I thought I had misheard her. The house was warm, filled with cinnamon, butter, roasted sweet potatoes, and the quiet kind of hope I had been foolish enough to carry all week. I had been awake since a little after 5, moving carefully through the kitchen so my knees would not stiffen before the drive to Claire's house. I had made the same green bean casserole Thomas loved, the same cranberry sauce he insisted tasted better with orange zest, and the same pie he used to sneak slices of before dinner when he thought I wasn't looking. 2 years after burying my husband, I still cooked like he might walk through the door and ask if there was coffee left. "Claire," I said softly, setting one mitt on the counter. "What do you mean don't come?" There was a pause on the other end. Not guilt. Not hesitation. More like she was choosing which version of cruelty would sound the most reasonable. I could hear voices behind her, dishes clinking, Daniel laughing at something in that easy way he used when he wanted everyone to think nothing serious was happening. "I mean exactly that, Mom," she said. "This year we decided it would be better if you stayed home." We. That word landed harder than the rest. Not I decided. Not Daniel and I thought. We. As if a committee had gathered around a table and voted me out of my own family. I looked at the small stack of serving dishes I had wrapped in clean towels for the car. One had belonged to my mother. One had a tiny chip near the rim from the first Thanksgiving Thomas and I hosted in Ohio, back when Claire was 6 and insisted on putting marshmallows on everything. "Is this because of something I said?" I asked. My voice sounded calm, almost polite, which surprised me. "It's because every holiday turns into a memorial for Dad," Claire replied. "You get emotional. You make everyone uncomfortable. The kids don't need that. None of us do." I looked toward the dining room, where Thomas's framed photograph sat on the sideboard. He was smiling in it, one hand tucked into the pocket of his navy jacket, his eyes narrowed against the sun. It had been taken in our backyard 3 summers before his heart gave out. "I wasn't planning to upset anyone," I said. "I only wanted to bring the dishes." Claire exhaled, the way she used to when I asked her to clean her room as a teenager. "Mom, please don't make this harder. Daniel and I are trying to have one peaceful Thanksgiving. No crying. No stories about Dad. No awkward silence. Just a normal family day. A normal family day. Without me." I pressed my hand flat against the counter and felt the cool edge of the marble beneath my palm. "I understand," I said. The words came out before I knew I had chosen them. Claire seemed relieved, which hurt more than anger would have. "Thank you. I knew you'd be reasonable." Reasonable. That was what people called older women when they surrendered without making them feel ashamed. "I'll call you tomorrow," she added, already somewhere else in her mind. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom." The line went dead before I could answer. I stood there with the phone in my hand while the kitchen timer blinked uselessly behind me. Outside, Maple Ridge was waking into the kind of Thanksgiving morning that looked painted for a greeting card. Bare maple branches moved in the November wind. A neighbor across the street carried a foil-covered tray to her car, while 2 little boys chased each other down the driveway in sweaters too nice for playing. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed. I set the phone down carefully. Then I unwrapped the serving dishes. One by one. The casserole. The cranberry sauce. The pie. Steam still rose from the sweet potatoes. Everything was ready. Everyone was gone. I did not cry. Not then. I simply pulled out one small plate, placed a slice of turkey from the refrigerator beside a spoonful of casserole, and sat at the kitchen table where Thomas used to read the newspaper. The chair across from me stayed empty. I ate 3 bites. Maybe 4. The food tasted exactly as it always had, which somehow made it worse. By noon, I had washed the dishes I never used. By 1, I had folded the towels back into the drawer. By 3, the house had gone quiet in that particular way a home does when it realizes no one is coming. I told myself Claire had been thoughtless, not cruel. I told myself grief made me sensitive. I told myself daughters could say sharp things and still love their mothers. Then, just after 6, my phone lit up with a Facebook notification. Claire had posted 23 photos. In the first one, my family sat around her long dining room table, smiling under gold paper leaves and candlelight. My grandchildren were laughing. Daniel was carving the turkey. Claire stood at the center in a cream sweater, one hand on the back of a chair that used to be mine. Sitting there instead was Evelyn Carter from Claire's charity board, wearing pearls and holding a glass of sparkling cider like she had always belonged there. The caption read, "Grateful for peaceful holidays, chosen family and fresh starts." I stared at those words until they blurred. Then I saw something behind Claire's elbow, half hidden beneath a gravy boat and a folded napkin. A blue folder rested on the sideboard. The label was turned just enough for me to read it. Ellis Family Property Review. My fork slipped from my hand and struck the plate with a sound so sharp it made me flinch. Thanksgiving had not been canceled for me because I was too emotional. I had been kept away because something was happening in my family in my house with my name on it, and Claire did not want me close enough to see. I kept the Facebook post open for nearly 10 minutes, not because I wanted to look at it, but because I could not make myself look away. Every photo felt arranged to prove that I had not simply been absent, but replaced. In one picture, Evelyn Carter was helping my granddaughter Lily tie a paper napkin into the shape of a bow. In another, my grandson Noah leaned against her shoulder while everyone laughed at something just outside the frame. I knew Evelyn only slightly. She was a widow with a large house near the country club, the kind of woman Claire admired because she never seemed to need anything from anyone. She wore bright lipstick donated to the right causes and called everyone sweetheart without ever sounding warm. I enlarged the photo until the screen blurred beneath my fingers. The blue folder was still there, half hidden behind a crystal bowl. Ellis Family Property Review. Not Thanksgiving recipes. Not family photos. Property. I said the word out loud in my empty kitchen and heard how cold it sounded. Property was what people discussed when they had stopped thinking of a house as a home. I set my phone down beside the plate I had barely touched and looked around the room. Thomas and I had painted ourselves the year Claire left for college. He had stood on a ladder near the window, getting soft yellow paint in his hair, while I laughed so hard I had to sit down. He said the color made the kitchen look like morning. For 28 years, this room had held birthday candles, report cards, medicine bottles, school permission slips, Christmas cookie trays, and every hard conversation a family could survive. Now, somewhere across town, my daughter had a folder with our name on it. I tried to tell myself there was an innocent explanation. Claire was organized. Claire liked documents. Claire had always believed problems could be solved with forms, signatures, and appointments. Maybe she was helping with taxes. Maybe Daniel had suggested reviewing the estate because winter was coming and the roof needed work. But then I remembered the way she had said, "We decided." I remembered how relieved she sounded when I did not argue. I opened the post again and read the caption a second time. Peaceful holidays. Chosen family. Fresh starts. Those were not careless words. Those were announcements. Under the photos, comments had started to gather. Beautiful table. So happy for you all. You deserve peace this year. Then I saw my cousin Marlene's name. So glad the house situation is finally getting handled. My hand went still. Beneath it, Claire had replied almost, just waiting on one more signature. One more signature. I stood so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. 3 weeks earlier, Claire had come by after church with a manila envelope tucked under her arm and that soft, efficient smile she used when she wanted me to feel old without saying the word. She said my homeowner's insurance needed updating because Thomas's name was still attached to certain records. She said it was only routine. She placed little yellow stickers beside the signature lines and turned each page before I could read more than a sentence. I had trusted her. Of course I had trusted her. She was my daughter. The girl I had driven to piano lessons in snowstorms. The girl who cried into my shoulder when her first boyfriend left for college. The girl Thomas used to call our bright little storm because she could fill a room with noise and make you thank her for it. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the small file box where I kept my copies of important papers. Insurance. Medical. Bank. Thomas's death certificate in a folder I still hated touching. My fingers trembled as I searched for the papers Claire had left behind. There were only 2 pages. Both vague. Both stamped with language that sounded official enough to quiet questions. Neither explained why a family property review would be sitting on Claire's Thanksgiving sideboard. By 7:30, the neighborhood had gone dark except for porch lights and television glow behind curtains. I sat at Thomas's old desk with a cup of coffee I did not drink, making a list on the back of an envelope. Claire brought papers. Daniel asked about the safe. Blue folder at Thanksgiving. Marlene knew about the house. One more signature. The list looked small, almost harmless. But so do cracks in a foundation before the wall shifts. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk and found Thomas's old reading glasses, folded neatly beside a stack of envelopes bound with a rubber band. For a moment I forgot the Facebook photos. I forgot Claire's voice. I touched the glasses and felt the familiar weight of missing him settle over me. Quiet and absolute. Thomas had handled the complicated things. Not because I was incapable, but because he liked protecting the life we built. He used to say, "Maggie, paperwork is where honest people get tired and dishonest people get busy." I had smiled at that once. I was not smiling now. 8:02 my phone rang. Claire's name appeared on the screen. I watched it vibrate across the desk. Once, twice, 3 times. I did not answer. A minute later a text arrived. "Hope you are not upset. Today was just complicated. We will talk soon." I read it twice, then placed the phone face down. Complicated was a word people used when the truth was too ugly to dress properly. I looked again at my list, then added one final line beneath the others. "Tomorrow call Robert Harlan." The next morning, I woke before sunrise with the kind of stillness that does not come from rest. The house was dark except for the pale gray light gathering behind the kitchen curtains. I made coffee, then forgot to drink it. The serving dishes from the day before were stacked clean in the cabinet, as if Thanksgiving had never happened, as if I had not stood in that same kitchen listening to my daughter politely close the door on me. I dressed carefully, not because I was going anywhere yet, but because grief has a way of making older women invisible, and I had no intention of looking like someone people could dismiss. Cream blouse. Gray slacks. Thomas's gold watch on my wrist. It had stopped years ago, but I still wore it when I needed courage. At 8:30 I called Robert Harlan's office. His receptionist, Denise, recognized my voice immediately. "Mrs. Ellis, good morning," she said, warmer than most people had been to me in months. "How can I help you?" I asked if Robert had an opening that day. There was a pause, then the faint clicking of a keyboard. "He is in court this morning, but he has a cancellation at 2. I almost accepted. Then I heard Thomas's voice in my memory, calm and practical. "Paperwork is where honest people get tired and dishonest people get busy." "Denise," I said, "please tell him it concerns my house, Claire, and documents I may have signed without understanding them." The clicking stopped. Her voice changed. "Hold on one moment, Mrs. Ellis." I stood beside the counter, staring at the little scratches in the wood where Thomas used to chop onions directly on the surface no matter how many cutting boards I bought him. Less than a minute later, Robert came on the line himself. He sounded older then. I remembered, but very awake. "Margaret," he said, "has your daughter asked you to sign anything related to the property?" There it was. Not how are you, not what happened, not why are you worried. The question was already waiting for me. I closed my eyes. She said it was insurance. Robert exhaled slowly. "Do you have copies?" "Only 2 pages. They do not explain much." "Do not sign anything else," he said. "Do not discuss this with Claire. Do not forward her any messages. Bring whatever you have to my office at 11. I looked at the clock above the stove. "I thought you were in court." "This is more important than a scheduling matter," he replied. That was the first moment I truly understood my daughter had not simply hurt my feelings. She had stepped into something Thomas had anticipated. Something legal. Something deliberate. After the call ended, I went to the hallway closet and took out the file box again. This time I did not move like a grieving widow searching for comfort. I moved like a woman checking the locks before a storm. I gathered the 2 vague pages Claire had left, the homeowner's policy, the deed copy Thomas had once told me to keep separate, and the printed screenshot of Claire's Facebook comment. I did not know if a Facebook comment mattered legally, but I knew it mattered morally. Just waiting on one more signature. Those words sat on the page like fingerprints. At 10:15, I backed my old Buick out of the driveway and drove toward downtown Maple Ridge. The town looked ordinary in the cold Friday light. Holiday wreaths hung from lampposts. The bakery had painted pumpkins and snowflakes on its windows, unable to choose between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Families walked in pairs carrying shopping bags, laughing about leftovers and sales. I wondered how many of them had sat at full tables the night before and still felt lonely. Robert's office was above a bank on Main Street, in a brick building with brass railings and an elevator that smelled faintly of furniture polish. I had not been there since Thomas's estate was settled. Back then, Claire had sat beside me, holding my hand for the first 15 minutes and checking her phone. For the next 40, I had mistaken impatience for discomfort with grief. Now I wondered how long she had been waiting for me to become easy to move aside. Denise met me at the door before I could sit down. "He is ready for you," she said gently. Robert stood when I entered. His hair was whiter, his shoulders thinner, but his eyes were sharp behind his glasses. On his desk lay a folder I had never seen before. Dark green. Neatly labeled. Thomas Ellis, Supplemental Estate Instructions. My breath caught at Thomas's name. Robert did not touch the folder right away. He looked at the papers in my hand, then at my face. "Margaret," he said, "before we begin, I need you to understand something. Thomas was worried before he died." I sat slowly. The leather chair made a soft sound beneath me. "Worried about what?" Robert's expression did not change, but his voice lowered. "About Claire. About pressure. About what might happen to you when he was no longer there to say no." The room seemed to tilt, not sharply, but enough that I had to place one hand on the armrest. "He never told me. He did not want to hurt you unless he had to." Robert opened the green folder and turned it toward me. "But he left instructions for exactly this moment." Robert slid the folder across the desk, but I did not open it right away. I looked at Thomas's name typed on the label, clean and official, and felt a strange ache move through me. For 2 years, people had spoken about my husband in the past tense as if he had become a chapter everyone else had finished reading. But there, in that green folder, he felt present again. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just steady the way he had always been when something important needed protecting. "What is this?" I asked. Robert folded his hands on the desk. "It is a second will, along with a set of instructions Thomas added 6 months before he passed." The words reached me slowly. A second will. I knew about the first one. Thomas had made it years earlier, when Claire was newly married and the grandchildren were still small. It was simple, generous, almost sentimental. I would keep the house and enough savings to live comfortably, and whatever remained after my passing would go to Claire and the children. Thomas had believed then that kindness given forward would be returned with kindness. He was not a naive man, but he loved his daughter with the stubborn hope of a father who remembered her as a little girl in red rain boots, not a grown woman counting rooms before her mother was gone. Why would he make another one? I asked, though part of me already knew. Robert removed his glasses and polished them with a square white cloth. "Because he came to see me after an argument with Claire." My throat tightened. "She never told me about any argument. I do not think she wanted you to know." Robert opened a side drawer and took out a yellow legal pad covered in his handwriting. "Thomas said Claire had started asking about transferring the house into a family trust. She told him it would simplify matters. She said taxes would be easier. She said you would not have to worry about paperwork if your health declined." I stared at him. I remembered Claire using those same words with me. Simplify. Easier. Nothing to worry about. Soft words, padded words, words meant to make a locked door sound like a blanket. "Thomas said no," Robert continued. Firmly. A small smile touched his face, gone almost as soon as it appeared. "Your husband could be very polite when refusing someone, which somehow made the refusal harder to challenge." That was true. Thomas never raised his voice. He simply became immovable. I could see him sitting in this very chair, one ankle crossed over the other, listening to Robert explain options while already knowing what he intended to do. "Claire was angry?" I asked. "Very," Robert said. "According to Thomas, she accused him of not trusting her. She said you were too emotional to manage assets alone. She said Daniel had financial experience, and they could help preserve the family legacy." Family legacy. I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. The phrase sounded noble until you realized people usually used it when they wanted something before anyone had offered it. Robert turned the green folder toward me and opened it. The pages were thick, cream-colored, each one marked and witnessed. I saw Thomas's signature near the bottom, familiar and strong, the final letters slanting upward as if he had written them with certainty. My fingertips hovered above the ink but did not touch it. "He left the house entirely to you," Robert said. "Not shared. Not conditional. Entirely. He also placed the savings account, the investment account, and his share of the small commercial property on Dayton Road under your sole control." I blinked. Dayton Road. Thomas had once owned a small building with his brother, but I thought it had been sold years ago. "He kept a minority interest," Robert explained. "It produces modest income. Not a fortune, but enough to matter." Enough to matter. I thought of the thermostat I had kept at 66 degrees all last winter because I worried about heating bills. I thought of postponing dental work, telling myself discomfort was normal at my age. I thought of Claire arriving in a new sport utility vehicle and telling me I worried too much about money. Robert pointed to a paragraph halfway down the page. "This is the provision that matters most today." I leaned closer. The words were formal, but their meaning came through with painful clarity. Any beneficiary who attempted to coerce, isolate, mislead, or pressure Margaret Ellis into relinquishing her residence, signing over assets, altering estate documents, or surrendering control of property would forfeit all rights under the will. I read it once. Then again. My eyes stopped on one word. Isolate. Yesterday, Claire had told me not to come. She had done it on a family holiday, with witnesses around her and no witnesses around me. She had not just been cruel. She had been careless. "Thomas wrote this?" I whispered. Robert nodded. "He called it your protection clause." He paused, then added quietly, privately, "He called it the Thanksgiving clause." I looked up. For the first time since Claire's call, something inside me became still in a different way. Not numb. Not broken. Clear. "Why Thanksgiving?" Robert's expression softened. "Because Thomas said holidays reveal what people really believe family means. He hoped it would never be needed." I sat back and looked toward the window, where downtown Maple Ridge moved on below us, cars stopping at the light, people carrying coffee, the world unaware that my life had just shifted under my feet. Thomas had seen the crack before I had. He had stood between me and it as long as he could, and when he knew he might not always be there, he left a line in ink that Claire had just stepped across. Robert did not let me leave with only shock in my hands. He made copies of the second will, placed one in a sealed envelope, and gave me a yellow legal pad with 3 instructions written in his careful block letters. "Do not sign anything. Do not warn Claire. Document everything." I read those lines while sitting in my Buick outside his office, the engine running, warm air brushing against my ankles. Across Main Street, a young couple carried leftover pie boxes from the bakery, laughing as the wind lifted the woman's scarf. The world looked too normal for what I had just learned. I wanted to call Claire. I wanted to ask how long she had been planning to move me out of my own life. I wanted to ask whether she looked at my face during Thanksgiving meals and saw her mother or just one more obstacle between herself and square footage. Instead, I placed Robert's envelope in my purse and drove to First County Bank. Thomas and I had opened our account there in 1987, back when the lobby smelled like fresh carpet and Claire still needed a booster seat in the car. The building had changed since then, all glass walls and little bowls of peppermint candy, but Mrs. Alvarez still worked at the front desk. She had silver hair now, pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, and when she saw me, her smile softened. "Mrs. Ellis, how are you holding up?" she asked. People asked that question when they expected the answer to be small. I gave her one. "I am managing." Then I asked to speak with someone about recent document requests tied to my accounts and property records. Her smile faded just enough to tell me she understood the shape of the problem before I explained it. 20 minutes later, I sat across from a young account manager named Kevin, who looked barely older than my grandson would be in another decade. He was polite, cautious, and very interested in the phrase my attorney advised me to review recent authorization activity. That sentence opened doors grief never could. He printed a list of inquiries made over the previous 6 weeks. 2 from Claire. 1 from Daniel. 1 from a property management company I had never heard of. "No funds were moved," Kevin said quickly, as if that should comfort me. But there were requests for verification of ownership, account beneficiary status, and whether you had granted durable power of attorney. My mouth went dry. Power of attorney? He turned the screen slightly away, not enough to hide it, only enough to follow policy. There was an unsigned draft submitted for preliminary review. It named Claire Whitman as agent. Agent. Such a tidy word for someone preparing to stand where they did not belong. I asked for printed copies of everything I was legally allowed to have. Kevin hesitated until I placed Robert's card on the desk. Then the printer behind him began to hum. Page after page slid out, each one warmer than the last, as if the machine itself knew these papers had been waiting too long. From the bank, I drove to the county recorder's office. The woman at the counter wore a cardigan covered in tiny embroidered pumpkins, even though Thanksgiving was over. She called me honey twice before I explained what I needed. After that, she called me Mrs. Ellis. There had been no completed transfer of my house, but there had been a title search ordered by Whitman Family Consulting, Daniel's company. I stood under the fluorescent lights, holding the printed record in both hands, and remembered Daniel at Easter, leaning against my kitchen counter saying, "Maggie, a house this old can become a burden before you notice." He had said it kindly. That was the trick. Kindness can be used as wrapping paper. Inside there may still be a demand. By the time I returned home, the sun was low and the maple trees along my street had turned black against the orange sky. I carried the papers inside in a grocery tote so no neighbor would see a legal envelope and ask questions. The house greeted me with silence, but it no longer felt empty. In the same way, it felt watchful. I spread everything across Thomas's desk. Bank inquiries. Title search. The 2 vague pages Claire had left me. The screenshot from Facebook. Robert's copy of the provision. Each document was a small flat thing. Together they had weight. At 5:40 my phone rang again. Claire. I let it go to voicemail. A text followed almost immediately. Mom, we need to talk about yesterday. I know you are upset, but please do not turn this into something bigger than it is. I read it once, then took a screenshot. At 6:10 another message arrived. Daniel and I are only trying to make sure you are safe. You have been forgetful lately, and the house is a lot for one person. Screenshot. At 6:32, she sent the message that made my hand stop shaking. Also, please do not speak to anyone about the papers yet. It will only confuse things. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I printed it, placed it on top of the stack, and wrote the date in the corner. Thomas had left me protection. Claire had left me proof. By Saturday morning my kitchen table had become a map of betrayal. I did not use that word lightly. Betrayal is not one cruel sentence or one missed invitation. It is a pattern that waits for your trust to grow old, then uses that trust as a key. I woke before 7, put on a pot of coffee, and carried the papers from Thomas's desk to the kitchen because the light was better there. I arranged them in order. First, Claire's insurance forms. Then the bank inquiries. Then the title search. Then the screenshots. Finally, Robert's copy of the protection clause, folded once and placed at the top like a roof over everything else. I read each page slowly, forcing myself not to rush past the parts that hurt. The dates told their own story. Claire had brought me the papers on October 29th. Daniel's company had ordered the title search on November 6th. The bank inquiry about power of attorney came 3 days later. Then Claire had called 2 relatives, Marlene and my nephew Grant, telling them I was having trouble keeping up with things. I knew because Grant left me a voicemail that morning, awkward and careful, saying he hoped I was doing all right and that Claire was only worried. Only worried. People hide many things under worry. Control. Greed. Embarrassment. Even fear. At 9:15 I called Grant back. I did not accuse anyone. I did not cry. I asked him exactly what Claire had told him. There was a long silence. Then he said, "Aunt Margaret, she said you were forgetting bills and leaving the stove on." I looked toward the stove. The knobs were clean. The burners cold. "Did she give an example?" I asked. "Not really," he admitted. "She just said Daniel was helping organize the house situation before it became urgent." There it was again. House situation. I wrote it down. "Thank you for telling me," I said. He sounded relieved, then ashamed. "I should have called sooner." Yes, I said gently. You should have. After we hung up, I made a second column on my yellow pad. Not documents this time. People. Marlene. Grant. Evelyn Carter. Daniel. Claire. I stared at my daughter's name for several seconds before underlining it once. Not twice. Once was enough. Around noon, I drove to the copy shop near the pharmacy and scanned every document to a flash drive Robert had given me. The young man behind the counter asked if I needed help naming the files. I told him yes. We labeled them by date. October 29 signed papers. November 6 title search. November 9 bank inquiry. November 23 Facebook post. November 24 text messages. He did not ask questions. I appreciated that. By the time I got home, Claire's car was in my driveway. She was standing on my porch in a camel-colored coat, holding a paper grocery bag from the upscale market on Birch Avenue. For one foolish second, I wanted to believe she had brought leftovers and an apology. A daughter should be able to stand on her mother's porch with food and make the world softer. Then I saw her face. Not sorry. Prepared. Mom, she said when I stepped out of the car. You have not been answering. I have been busy. Her eyes moved to my tote bag. Busy with what? Errands. She gave a small laugh, too light to be real. You are acting strange. Daniel and I are concerned. I walked past her and unlocked the front door. She followed before I invited her in, the way she had started doing lately, as if the house had already become partly hers. In the kitchen, she placed the grocery bag on the counter. Inside were turkey slices, mashed potatoes, and one small container of cranberry sauce. Leftovers measured like charity. I brought you some food, she said. You barely ate yesterday, I am sure. I looked at the bag, then at her. I ate enough. Claire removed her gloves finger by finger. Mom, I know you saw the pictures. I know your feelings are hurt, but this is exactly what I mean. You take everything personally. Being told not to come to Thanksgiving felt personal. Her mouth tightened. You were not banned. You were given space. Space. Another soft word. Another locked door in a nicer coat. She sat without asking and folded her hands on my kitchen table, inches from where the documents had been only an hour earlier. We need to talk about the house, she said. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down slowly. Then talk. Claire leaned forward, her voice gentle enough for an audience that was not there. This place is too much for you. The stairs, the yard, the bills, all of it. Daniel found a beautiful senior apartment community 15 minutes from us. Safe, clean, no maintenance. You would still have independence. And my home? I asked. We would manage it, she said quickly. Too quickly. Only until we decide what makes sense. I looked at my daughter's polished face, at the careful concern she had painted over ambition. For the first time, I did not search for the child she had been. I looked at the woman in front of me. Claire, I said, have you ever wondered why your father never put this house in your name? Her eyes flickered. Just once. Small. Perfect. Enough. That is not fair, she said. Dad trusted me. I stood, picked up the grocery bag and handed it back to her. Then you should not mind if I ask Robert Harlan to review everything before I sign another page. The color changed in her face so quickly that no words were needed. She took the bag from my hands. You called Robert? I smiled then very slightly. Your father did first. Claire stood very still with the grocery bag in her hands, and for a moment the only sound in my kitchen was the refrigerator humming beside the pantry. I had seen my daughter surprised before. When she got her college acceptance letter. When Daniel proposed in the gazebo at Riverside Park. When Thomas bought her first used car and tied a red ribbon around the antenna because he said bows were too expensive for a vehicle with 80,000 miles on it. But this surprise was different. It had no joy in it. It was the look of someone hearing a floorboard crack beneath a rug she had carefully arranged. What does that mean? She asked. I pushed in my chair. It means I am tired and you should go home. Mom. Her voice sharpened, then softened again when she heard herself. You are making this adversarial when it does not need to be. Adversarial. Claire had always loved words that made ordinary wrongdoing sound like a misunderstanding between professionals. I did not make it anything, I said. I was making pies. Her mouth opened then closed. For 1 second I saw the argument she wanted to have and the fear that stopped her from having it. If she raised her voice she would prove too much. If she acted innocent she might lose control of the conversation. She chose injury. I cannot believe you would bring Dad into this. That almost worked. Thomas's name still had the power to soften me. It always would. But I looked at the blue veins on the back of my hands, hands that had packed Claire's lunches, hemmed her prom dress, held Thomas's wedding ring after the funeral director gave it back to me in a small velvet pouch. Those hands had done enough trembling. Your father never left this house, I said. Not in the ways that matter. Claire picked up her purse from the counter. Daniel was right, she said quietly. You are becoming suspicious of everyone. No, I replied. Only the people who ask me to sign things and then tell me not to ask questions. The grocery bag crinkled in her grip. She set it down again, as if suddenly remembering it was supposed to make her look caring. Keep the food, she said. You should eat. Then she walked out without another word. I watched through the front window as she backed out of my driveway too quickly, her tires scattering dry leaves across the curb. I did not feel victorious. That surprised me. I felt old. Not weak, not confused, just old enough to understand that some conversations end long before anyone stops speaking. The daughter who left my porch that afternoon was not coming back as the child I remembered. A woman with my child's face had come to measure my life and found it inconvenient. I locked the door then checked it twice. That night I called Robert and told him exactly what had happened. He listened without interrupting. When I finished he said, She knows you know enough to be dangerous. I do not feel dangerous. You do not have to, he said. You only have to be accurate. Accurate became my word for the next 2 days. On Sunday morning, I wrote down Claire's visit from memory, including the time she arrived, the words she used, and the moment her face changed when I mentioned Robert. I added the grocery receipt she had left in the bag, because even small details have dates. Then I called Marlene. She answered on the second ring, overly cheerful, which meant she already knew there was trouble. I hate being in the middle, she said before I had accused her of anything. Then stand on the truth, I replied. Silence followed. Eventually, she admitted Claire had told several relatives I was resisting a necessary transition. That was the phrase. Necessary transition. Not being pushed from my home. Not being isolated on a holiday. A necessary transition. Marlene said Claire planned to invite everyone over that evening to clear the air. I thanked her and called Robert again. By 4 o'clock, the plan had formed without anyone needing to call it one. Claire wanted an audience. She would have one. But this time, she would not be the only person bringing papers. Robert arrived at my house just after 5 with a leather briefcase and a calm expression. He reviewed my stack at Thomas's desk, placing sticky notes on the strongest pieces. The text telling me not to speak to anyone about the papers. The title search from Daniel's company. The unsigned power of attorney draft. The Facebook comment about one more signature. He looked at the documents the way a surgeon might look at an X-ray, not emotional, not hurried, simply locating the break. Tonight you say very little, he told me. Let Claire explain herself. Let Daniel speak if he wants to. People often fill silence with useful mistakes. I changed into the navy dress Thomas always liked, the one with pearl buttons at the sleeves. I brushed my hair until the silver lay smooth against my head and pinned my wedding ring to the inside of my purse, where I could touch it if I needed to. Before leaving, I stood in the kitchen and looked at the untouched pecan pie from Thanksgiving. It sat under foil on the counter, no longer fresh but still whole. I almost threw it away. Instead, I cut one small slice, wrapped it in wax paper, and placed it in my purse beside the envelope. It made no sense. Or maybe it made perfect sense. Claire had taken my chair, my holiday, and nearly my home. She would not take the last thing I had made with love before I understood who she had become. Claire's house was only 12 minutes from mine, but the drive felt longer than any trip I had taken in years. Maple Ridge was quiet that Sunday evening, the streets washed in the blue-gray light that comes before winter settles fully over Ohio. Most houses still had pumpkins on the porches and early Christmas lights wrapped around railings, cheerful little signals that families were moving from one celebration to the next without difficulty. I kept both hands on the wheel and drove under the speed limit. Robert followed behind me in his black sedan. Never too close, never too far. That steadiness helped. When I pulled up to Claire's house, the front windows glowed gold. Through the glass, I could see people moving in the dining room. Marlene was there. Grant and his wife. Evelyn Carter in another strand of pearls. Daniel stood near the fireplace with a drink in his hand, wearing the calm expression of a man who believed the uncomfortable part would happen to someone else. Claire opened the door before I rang the bell. She had changed into a soft green sweater and small diamond earrings, the costume of a caring daughter. Her eyes went past me to Robert's car, and the smile she had prepared tightened at the corners. "Mom," she said, "I thought this was family." "It is," I replied. "Robert knew your father longer than Daniel did." She did not like that. I could tell by the way she stepped aside too slowly. The house smelled like reheated turkey, cinnamon candles, and something floral I could not identify. On the dining room table, the Thanksgiving centerpiece was still there, gold leaves curling around white candles. My chair, the one closest to the kitchen, was empty tonight. I wondered if that was guilt or staging. Claire guided me toward it with a hand that stopped just short of touching my elbow. "Sit here, Mom." Robert remained standing near the sideboard, his briefcase in one hand. No one asked him to sit. No one asked him to leave. That was the first small shift in the room. Claire had wanted witnesses, but she had not expected one with a law license. I sat down and placed my purse on my lap. Inside, the envelope rested against the wrapped slice of pecan pie. It was such a strange thing to carry into a family reckoning, but I liked knowing it was there. A reminder that I had arrived as the woman who baked for them, not the woman they described later. Claire stood at the head of the table, exactly where Thomas used to stand when he carved the turkey at our house. "Thank you all for coming," she began. Her voice was warm, almost tremulous. "This is not easy, but families sometimes have to make hard decisions with love." I looked at Marlene. She looked down at her hands. Claire continued. "Mom has had a difficult time since Dad passed. We all know that. She has been lonely, overwhelmed, and frankly not always realistic about what she can manage." The words moved around the room like cold air under a door. Daniel nodded slowly, as if this had been discussed in rehearsals. "The house is old," he added. "There are stairs, maintenance issues, property taxes. No one is saying Margaret cannot make choices, but we have to be practical." Practical. The same word people used when they wanted compassion to step aside. Kept my face still. Robert had told me to say very little. Claire took a folder from the sideboard. Blue. The same folder from the photo. Seeing it in person felt different. Not worse exactly. Cleaner. The thing was no longer a shadow in the background. It was evidence with corners. "We found a wonderful senior apartment community," Claire said, opening the folder. 550 square feet, ground floor, emergency call system, meal plan available. Only 15 minutes from us. Mom would be safe, and the house could be handled responsibly. Handled by whom? Grant asked quietly. Claire blinked. She had not expected him to speak. "By the family," she said. "Daniel and I would oversee the transition." Evelyn Carter gave a sympathetic hum. "It really can be a blessing to downsize before things become too much." I turned to her. "Did Claire tell you I asked to downsize?" Evelyn's lips parted, then closed. Claire stepped in quickly. "Mom, that is not the point." "It feels like the point," I said. My voice was soft, but the room heard it. Daniel set his glass down. "Margaret, no one is trying to take anything. We are trying to avoid a crisis." Robert opened his briefcase. The sound of the latch was small, but it cut through the room with surprising force. Claire's eyes went to him. "I do not think we need attorneys for a family conversation." "Then you should not have brought legal documents into it," Robert said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Claire's face changed, not dramatically, just enough for Marlene to notice. I saw my cousin sit straighter. Robert removed a stack of papers and placed them on the table in front of me, not in front of Claire. That mattered. "Before anyone discusses Mrs. Ellis leaving her residence," he said, "this family should understand the governing estate documents." Claire forced a laugh. "We all know what Dad's will says." Robert looked at her over his glasses. No, Claire. You know what the first will says. The room went silent so completely that I could hear the candle flame flicker inside its glass holder. Claire looked at me, then really looked, and for the first time all week she did not see a grieving old woman. She saw the envelope. She saw Robert. She saw the chair she had kept empty too late. Claire's hand moved toward the blue folder, but Robert placed 2 fingers lightly on the papers in front of me. He did not touch her. He did not have to. The second will was signed by Thomas Ellis 6 months before his passing, he said. It revoked and replaced the earlier document in all matters concerning the residence, savings accounts, investment interests, and conditional beneficiary rights. Claire laughed once too quickly. That cannot be real. Dad would have told me. Your father was not required to tell you, Robert said. He was required to be competent, properly witnessed, and clear in his intentions. He was all 3. Daniel leaned forward, his voice smooth but thinner than before. What intentions are we talking about exactly? Robert turned 1 page and began reading. The language was formal, but every word seemed to land with a plainness no one could escape. The house belonged to me. The savings belonged to me. The investment income belonged to me. Not temporarily. Not until Claire decided otherwise. Mine because Thomas had made it so. Marlene covered her mouth. Grant stared at the table. Evelyn Carter suddenly looked as if she wished she had chosen a different Sunday dinner. Claire's face stayed composed, but her fingers tightened around the back of a chair. Fine, she said. If Mom wants to keep struggling in that house, that is her choice. We were only trying to help. Robert looked at me. I nodded once. Then he read the next provision. Any beneficiary who attempted to isolate, pressure, mislead, or coerce Margaret Ellis into surrendering her residence, granting control over assets, signing legal authority, or relocating against her stated wishes would forfeit all rights under the estate. He stopped there and let the silence do what anger never could. Claire's lips parted. Daniel sat back slowly. The candles on the table burned between us, tiny steady flames in a room that had just lost its excuses. That is ridiculous, Claire said, but her voice had changed. No one coerced anyone. I opened my purse and removed the envelope. Not quickly. Not with drama. Just carefully, the way Thomas used to handle important mail. I placed Claire's text messages on the table first. Please do not speak to anyone about the papers yet. It will only confuse things. Then the bank inquiry about durable power of attorney. Then the title search ordered by Daniel's company. Then the screenshot of the Thanksgiving post, with Marlene's comment and Claire's reply. Almost. Just waiting on one more signature. No one spoke while Robert arranged the documents in a neat line. He was very good at silence. Finally, Grant looked at Claire and said, You told us Aunt Margaret was forgetting things. Claire's eyes flashed toward him. She has been under a lot of stress. That is not what I asked, he said. Marlene pushed her chair back slightly. You told me she had agreed to the apartment. Claire turned to me then, and for a moment she looked less like a strategist and more like the child who had once blamed a broken lamp on the family dog. Mom, I was trying to protect you. I looked at her hands, her sweater, the diamond earrings catching candlelight. No, I said. You were trying to protect your plan. Daniel cleared his throat. This has gotten out of proportion. Maybe everyone should take a breath. Robert closed the folder. The estate will be notified that the forfeiture clause has been triggered. Given the documentation already reviewed, Claire's beneficiary rights are subject to removal. Daniel, your company's involvement will also be examined. Daniel's face emptied of color. Claire gripped the chair so tightly I thought the wood might creak, but it did not. Nothing broke. That mattered to me. There was no shouting, no spectacle, no scene the family could later twist into proof that I was unstable. There was only a table, a will, and the truth sitting plainly between the candles. Claire whispered, Dad would never do this to me. For the first time all night I felt something close to sorrow. Your father did not do this to you, I said. He wrote down what would happen if you did it to yourself. Her eyes filled, but I could no longer tell whether the tears were for me, for Thomas, or for the inheritance slipping out of reach. I stood and lifted my purse from the chair. The wrapped slice of pecan pie was still inside, soft at the edges, probably ruined by now. I was glad I had brought it anyway. It reminded me that I had entered this story with love. Claire had chosen what to do with it. At the door she said my name, not Mom, just Margaret. I turned back. The dining room looked smaller than it had when I arrived. You kept me away from the table, I said quietly. But you showed everyone why your father made sure I would never lose the house. Then I walked out. Robert followed a few steps behind me, but he did not speak until we reached the driveway. Are you all right? He asked. The cold air smelled like leaves and distant wood smoke. I looked toward the street that led home, to the yellow kitchen Thomas had painted, to the desk where his glasses still waited, to the rooms Claire had tried to rename before I had left them. No, I said. But I am protected. That night I warmed a small piece of pie in the microwave for 20 seconds and ate it at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee. The house was quiet. The chair across from me was empty. But for the first time in 2 years it did not feel like abandonment. Felt like space. Space to breathe. Space to remember. Space to remain exactly where Thomas had wanted me to be.